It had been rolled tight or crumpled close. A scrap in the pocket of the jeans he wore now, and that he had worn when he was taken. He had created the fun, and the light in her eyes, which had been captured by the booth's lens. When she had met him, it had been months, years, since she had laughed or giggled. Once, the photograph had been seized by a trusty prisoner who had come to escort him from one block to another. The man had glanced at it, then thrown it down as valueless. He smoothed it, drank in the strength of the eyes, wondered where she was, what she was doing, whether her husband was in bed beside her or away. Those who knew Johnny and recognized him as an agitator, a coke-taker, addicted to alcohol, an activist, would have found it difficult to believe that a married woman living close to the bazaar and from a background he would hardly have known could captivate him. He pushed himself up and faced the door. He screwed up the photograph, made a tiny ball of it. It was in his left hand, his fist clenched round it. The bolt scraped. The noises, fear and shock, of the two men to be executed with him were louder. The guards came around him. His arms were pulled behind his back, and thongs were wrapped tightly round his wrists, then fastened. It hurt, but pain was of little importance to him now. He walked, didn't allow them to push or drag him through the door. He looked into the faces of the other two men. He didn't know whether they were political opponents of the regime or drug traffickers, rapists or murderers. He saw slack mouths, glazed eyes, sunken chins, shaking shoulders. He heard their muted terror. Softly, Johnny said, "Don't let them see your fear, or they'll have won." He took his place at the front. There was a nudge at his elbow, and he started for the end of the corridor. He could feel against the softer skin in the palm of his left hand the screwed-up paper that was her picture, little bigger than an orange pip. They went briskly, and he set the pace. At the end of the corridor, there was a grille of wrought iron bars. It was opened noisily. 3 times, since Johnny had been transferred to the block, he had heard others taken out at dawn. Some had been brave. Others had screamed and struggled. A few had been in a state of collapse and were dragged. He walked briskly. The gate closed behind them. In the lobby beyond, his interrogator waited. He was a stout man, with a seemingly permanent cold sore beside his mouth and breath that stank of chilies. He had always looked away when Johnny was whipped with the cables and when the pliers wrenched off his fingernails. Johnny had wondered whether the interrogator, after a hard day inflicting pain in the name of the regime, went home and played with his children, then made love to his wife, or if he sat alone in his living room as the darkness closed round him, hearing screams and seeing blood. He tilted his head, looked the man in the face, and sneered. The interrogator didn't know about the woman Johnny had briefly loved. That was a triumph. There were no other interrogators in the lobby, which told him that the other 2 men were classified as criminals. They had not been convicted of mohareb, making war against God and his prophet, the offence of which Johnny had been found guilty. His interrogator caught his glance, would have expected him to look away, but he did not. It was the interrogator who broke the contact. Good. Johnny walked on. He knew the route. They went out into the faint first stirrings of dawn. He could see the shape of the mountains in front of him, and from the east part of the sun was visible.